All right, what's up everybody? This is gonna be the first instructional video. If you're following with the JY Dojo, this is obviously the Zerg perspective. Before I jump into it, for people who are not a part of the live program, just kind of consuming the video content, basically what I'm gonna be doing is just putting together a series of videos that does a deep dive into a build. I'm going to be segmenting the build by time period. So for example, this first week is going to be 0 to about 7:30 minutes. And we're just going to be focusing on that build, focusing on the ins and the outs, kind of educating on like what are some of the key pointers that you should consider and log as you kind of just practice by yourself. Just kind of as a disclaimer, this isn't really about, teaching you how to win or really saying like this is the best build to play or this is not really optimal for, winning a show match tomorrow or something, right? This is really to just kind of show you how do you approach StarCraft from like a structured manner. Like how do you break down the game? How do you learn how to analyze your replays? How do you know that you're actually improving? Aside from just assessing your win and loss, which can kind of feel like, I don't know, a little bit loose sometimes. So, yeah, so we'll just dive right into it. This is actually a single player game, and I'll be pausing pretty much, a lot to kind of talk into a lot of the details. But hopefully this is helpful, and I encourage those who are not a part of the program to kind of keep up with this and like practice this on single player. Practice this, do the builds on your own, capture some of the metrics, write them down on a piece of paper, right? And if you're playing a real game, try to see how your metrics start to degrade against an actual opponent, right? And really try to reconcile these small things over time. So as we compartmentalize, we're going to try to dive into this. Hopefully over time, these small things kind of become second nature. So let's start the game. All right, so this is Polypoid. That was a bad split there, by the way. But anyways, really, one of the first things that you should probably learn is mineral boosting, right? Like learning which of the mineral patches are important. And this might seem really rudimentary, but why not, right? Like, why not just do this? You see how I'm trying to like mine the patches that are closest to the hatchery? You actually see that the one right here is kind of bouncing really fast, right? Or actually it wasn't because I'm not actually boosting, but some of them are boosted. You can also boost this top mineral, which I'm not boosting in this game, but that's okay. Just trying to give you awareness about like, hey, these are things that you want to practice every single game because you're always going to be mining, and just always be conscious of that, okay? This build that we're going to be going into is an Overpool build, right? If you're a beginner, this is basically just getting that Overlord right at 9. And right when you hit 200 minerals, you're going to get right at that spawning pool. This is a good build because it's a nice in-the-middle build, right? It does reasonably well against Proxy 2 gates. You can punish really greedy Protoss. It's good against Gate Expand. It's good against Forge Expand. It doesn't really like blow any Protoss out of the water per se. Like it's not a hard counter to anything unless your opponent's being like super duper greedy. But I really recommend this build because it really gives you a foundation, right? So instead of playing something too greedy like a 12 hatch, this really helps you to not try to have that gambling mode where you want to cut corners and whatnot. So the second drone that popped is going to go out and scout, and then the next one you can just send it to the natural to make a hatchery right at 11. And I want to pause here really quick. One thing that I think is also kind of underrated, and if you're practicing this on single player, is that you should always like try to send your Overlord in the right directions, and also make sure that you pivot the Overlords as you scout your opponent, right? So in this case, I scouted, what is this, counterclockwise, because you want to scout your Overlord in the direction of your opponent's natural, right? Because if I went clockwise, I don't really hit their natural, and I can't really see if they're going for like a gate or forge expand as well. So I would always recommend that you go in the direction of the natural, and that's your Overlord that's popping. You should always put it at your natural to see if you're at risk of getting rushed by cannons. Cannon Rush isn't going to be very common against an Overpool, but if they're going for like a double 9 gate and they want to, you know, make like a battery rush, this helps to kind of see what's going on, and it just kind of puts you at ease, okay? So once this is done, you should always try to send both of your Overlords in the direction of the Protoss base once you know where they are, right? So I see a lot of lower level players that are kind of like, they send their Overlords in one direction, and then all of a sudden they just leave it there and they just forget, right? It's super important because you want to always see the front of their base so that you're able to see zealots coming out. You can also scout their builds and whatnot. So we're gonna scout with this, right? And then with the Overpool build, usually the standard, you can open with, you know, an aggressive 6 lings or something, but in this build, I'm just gonna open about, you know, 2 lings. When I say 2, I mean just a single pair. And you don't want to spend the larva until you've scouted your opponent, right? Because if they're opening gate expand, then you want to spend the larva making more lings rather than making drones, right? So don't spend this until you've scouted 2 places, right? You see how my money, I can't even spend it until my drone actually scouts this location. In this game, there is no opponent. Let's just assume that my opponent is at the bottom left. Let's assume that we've found a forge fast expand, and in that case, we're gonna make drones, right? So you just make 2 lings to bust down the probe. You can make 4 lings, but if you're going for a 4-ling build, you really should be chasing down their probe, because otherwise you're down 1 drone and it's not really necessary economically. So I'm going to bring the drone scout back, and you see immediately I'm going to pivot my Overlord the second I know that they're not at these locations, right? Now you don't want both Overlords at the same place, but it's always good to have them in position to catch stray zealots out on the map. With this build, I'm actually just going straight for a gas right at around 240. I like to get it a couple seconds earlier. Let's keep that in mind right there. That 241 gas that I got. I prefer to get it like 238-ish, and we'll see why that matters. But if you get that gas that early, your hatch is going to be a little bit later, but that's okay, right? Because you're going to need that gas later to tech into a Spire, and that Spire is going to allow you to get a Scourge in time to deflect a Corsair, okay? So once you have that 3rd hatchery going with the gas, then you just want to start droning. Don't forget about your Overlord right at 16, because you don't want to get supply blocked. And getting supply blocked is really, it's really hurtful for economy, right? And you might think, like, right now at this stage, there's not a whole lot to do, right? Not a lot's going on. Maybe you're like chasing a probe or something. You know, maybe their gateway's about to finish, or you know. One thing that you should always keep in mind is that the mining of your mineral patches is very, very important, okay? And I'm going to be a real stickler about this for those who I'm coaching, okay? As you're mining, you should always keep track by just selecting your drones and counting how many drones you have that are mining your main, okay? You should always have 9. You still have 8 and then 1 and then 3 on the gas, so that's 12 total, right? The second you get to 9 drones here, you want to send the rest of your drones to your natural until each one of these are saturated, which is going to get to about 7, okay? And this is very underrated, and this was also something that I myself did not fix for a very long time, and it hurt me a lot. And you'd be surprised at how much an imbalanced mining will impact your build later on. So you see how I'm just moving my drones over to the natural. This is self-mining at 9. If I ever make something, I have to replace that drone, right? And again, these are kind of the things that you want to focus in single player, right? Like if you're not playing against an opponent, make sure you're doing these small things and build that habit, and make sure you just assess in the replays, are my drones mining efficiently, right? Are they spread out evenly and whatnot? I guess going back to the build, sorry, you should obviously get your gas right at 100 gas. I make an Overlord right at 16 so I don't get blocked. And the second that I get 100 more gas, I get Ling speed, because I want to deflect any stray zealots that start to pop out, okay? So at a higher level, you always want to be keeping an eye on what exactly your opponent's doing. And when I say what they're doing, I mean when they're sending their zealots out, okay? And as a general rule of thumb, if you make 2 more pairs of lings right as your Overlord pops, you will be able to deflect their first Zealot if they send it out. Okay, so you see Overlord pops, I get 2 more Zealots, that gives me 6. And that also gives me Ling speed in about, I don't know, 30 more seconds. And everything else, I'm just droning, right? Droning. At around 24 supply, I like to get another Overlord because it's common to get Overlord blocked here. So don't just spam a whole bunch of drones, right? Don't try to be all fast and stuff. So at this point, once you have the Zerglings, they might have a Zealot like right here if they sent it out immediately. But if they don't, that's okay. You have 6 preemptive Lings to deal with any move outs. You can also backstab them because 6 Lings always bust 1 cannon, and you should always go for that opportunity if it's open, and it's just nice. So let me pause again here. Okay, I'm gonna pause here because what you want to do in this situation here, right, is you always want to scout what your opponent is trying to do. Okay, a very common opening here, imagine if there's like a gateway, a forge, and a pylon, right, is some Protoss like to go for a +1 upgrade really fast. And so right at around 415 to 430, always have this Overlord out here and look at their forge, okay? If their forge is spinning at this time, or like even a little bit earlier, that is a big tell that they're gonna go for a very fast Zealot push. So we'll go into responses and execution in the second month, but that's just one thing to kind of watch out for, okay? All right, so let's proceed with the build. You see I've got another Overlord so I don't get blocked. You notice that I have 7 drones here, right? So once I have 7 drones, you wanna make sure that you send the rest of your drones over at this base, okay? Just so that you have that optimal mining. Let's see if I do it. Let's see if I pass the test. All right, there we go, right? Sending the drones, right? So we need to have 6 drones here in order to be fully saturated. And as a general rule of thumb, for most builds, you want to be fully saturated at each base, okay? And right as your layer finishes, sorry, I missed this, you want to get that spire. But yeah, once you make that spire, you're short a drone, right? So if you're short a drone, make another one, right? In this game, I add 2 more pairs of Lings because I just kind of anticipate that, like, let's say the Protoss opponent wants to move out. You don't have to do this. You should always wait until they actually move out and then make some Lings reactively. Usually I like to wait until they like get to around half the map because sometimes they'll push out and then they'll just come back home. So it's always nice if they come out and you block it and you trade effectively. So let's move on with this build. I made some more Lings, I'm making some more drones, I'm rushing to get 1 drone per patch, and right at about 32 supply, I get a hatchery. And I believe I make it at my natural, right here, and let me pause here again, okay? Because again, we're doing a deep dive in the first 7 minutes. This hatchery, it's very important where you place the hatchery. Now, this might not be the optimal placements, but let me tell you the reasoning behind some of the building placements, okay? You should almost always build your hatchery in the same direction as your ramp, okay? It's a big mistake to make the hatchery on the other side of the ramp. Why? Because speed zealots are fast. If you make your hatchery over here and then you make a wall on the right side, there's a whole gap here that zealots can just kind of swing by and they can just waltz right into your base, or a Dark Templar or something, right? But if you put the hatchery at the same side as your ramp, right? No matter which map that you play, you always guarantee that the units have to go around before they go into your base, okay? Another point to consider, and I'm not going to go over all of the builds and the building placements and whatnot in this video, but you can reference some other ones, is that in general, you want your Hydra Den and your Evo chambers to be left or right and on the bottom of your hatchery. Now, that's not always going to stay true, but try not to put the Hydra Den or the Evo on top of your hatchery, because there's going to be a hole for zealots, okay? If you could put them in a way that's kind of adjacent left and right and more towards the bottom, you have a higher probability of it actually blocking, and that's going to be really important when you stop zealot pushes. So again, if you're practicing single player by yourself, start these habits. Just start thinking to yourself, like, how can I position my hatchery so that it's tight against zealots, okay? You should probably watch another video for that, but that's just another thing to call out. As I make this hatchery, we're gonna drone to 35. You see how I'm droning? I'm also trying to keep my drone status saturation even. I have 9 here, perfect. I've got about 8 here, so I've got one more, but I'm gonna make a Hydra den, right? So like up here, I've got 6, right? But you also have to be careful because you're gonna be making some tech buildings here, right? Like I'll be making another hatchery in just a bit, so you gotta make sure you have the right split of the, the drones, right? Another important thing to consider is that right at around your spire, when it's about to be done, notice where my overlords are, okay? And notice, I've got a ling here, I got some lings here. My Protoss opponent is over there. If the Protoss flies their Corsair and scouts my base, right? And a good Protoss should always scout your base. He's not running into any overlords, right? He's just going. He might go up. He must go all the way up here to find an overlord, but he might not do that. He might go like here and then left, and then he starts looking around. Like he's like, okay, fine, maybe I found one right here. I'll try to kill it, right? This is super important. You see how I'm moving my overlords out of position to get away from the path from the Protoss base to my base. Why? Because my spire isn't done yet. 5 to 10 seconds is the difference between you losing 1 or 2 or even 3 overlords sometimes, and you can get supply blocked and your build just goes down the drain, right? And it's important that you move this. And you might think, well, what if the Protoss just like goes in a funny direction to begin with and just kills your overlord first? That's something that they can do. But if they don't scout what the Zerg is doing, like let's say they go for this overlord and they just get lucky, they find it, they don't know what you're doing. And there's many ways that they can be punished. Right now, I'm not going to teach you how to punish that. And I'm sorry that we can't, lay that justice down to the Protoss yet. But because if a Protoss keeps playing like that, you might be, behind against them. But in the long run, they're going to hurt themselves because they don't know if you're going for a muta build. You might be going 3-hatch muta. They have no idea. And you might have 9 mutas flying into their base and it'll just be GG, right? So that's why you kind of have to play assuming that your opponent is intelligent. And if they're not, it's okay to deal with some injustice, okay? Just like let it go, play for the long run, say like, okay, they didn't know, they just did something stupid. A lot of Protoss players are stupid. So don't worry about it, don't fret. Move them out of the way. Get your 5th hatchery right at 35. See, I'm making my Hydra den simultaneously. I make a gas simultaneously with an Evo chamber. So a lot of times I personally like to get the den, gas, and then chamber, but sometimes I'll just kind of mix it up, or maybe I'm not paying attention or whatever, right? Then from here, again, it gets a little tricky because it's like, okay, like is my mining okay? Like let's say I have 8 there, so I guess I have 1 extra drone. I have 5 here and 1 drone going over there. So my mining is pretty decent, right? Pretty decent. So at this point, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you make an overlord and then you drone till 33, because right when your spire finishes, I want you to make 2 scourge, okay? 2 scourge, and that's to ward off the first Corsair and for the second pair to go scout your opponent's base, okay? You don't want to make 1 pair of scourge because they could start to snowball if they just Rambo into your overlords. And it's really important for you to scout, okay? So you see how I'm making a drone. And now that I'm mining gas here, I have to send drones to mine the gas, and that puts me at 6 drones, so now I need 1 more drone to compensate. But basically, the second your scourges come out, you should kill the Corsair if you can, right? Sometimes you can get away with that. I like sending 2 of them over to the front of the base, and then 2 of them to scout the main base, okay? At this point, I also would like to put my lings back home. Maybe you can leave 1 in front, but if you have the scourge out here, then you don't need your lings out there. And if you leave your lings out here, they're at risk of getting killed by a fast Dark Templar, which comes out right at about 6:30. Right about now, it would come out, and you want your Dark Templar you want your lings at these bases to fend off a potential Dark Templar. So if you have about 8 lings, I just send 4 over here, 4 over there, and then you have Hydras on the way, and that should be enough to thwart a single Dark Templar, okay? So let's do that. And once your upgrades are, once your you know, tech buildings are out, I like to prioritize Hydra speed. Then I try to get ranged upgrades, and then I try to get Overlord speed. You don't always have to make Overlord speed with certain builds, but I like to do it, and let's just do it for this build. And notice, now this is where I'm starting to get in position, right? So I've got 6 drones. I made one more, right? So again, I didn't do my build perfectly, right? Even I don't do my homework very well. I made that one drone, and then I went to go mine it. So now I'm in business. Okay, I've got one extra. Okay, I messed up my build. This single drone should have been all the way over here. So again, these are things you have to practice, and they have to be second nature. So I'm one drone over. It's not terrible to be overly rich, but at the same time, let's try to be precise. Okay, so 9, 7, 7, and then I've got 7 here. Okay, that's very important. Once you have 1 drone per patch, that's usually your cue to start pumping units. Okay, that means you can fully support 5 hatch production non-stop until the end of time, until you run out of minerals, and you can be macroing like a beast. Okay, that's a good benchmark to know. 30 drones equals 5 hatch production. Okay, and you should always watch your replays. Do I have 30 drones? If you start pumping Hydras with 24 drones and you realize, how come I'm so poor? Because you have 24 drones and you don't have the minimum amounts of resources to pull off this build, right? That's exactly why. And this is what I want you to practice, okay? So here, let's assume that I scout that my opponent is going for a 1-1 build, which means at around 7:30, they'll have about 7, 8 zealots, 5 plus 1 corsairs, and plus 1 zealots as well, right? All I'm doing is I'm just literally, first of all, I'm bunching up my overlords, right? Notice that I brought all of them back home. I'm bunching them up evenly at each base. I'm hiding behind my SimCity, right? And I'm just pumping Hydras. Nothing but slamming that H button and just pumping Hydras. Getting that ranged upgrade as soon as I can. And right at about 7:30, we're going to pause it. Let's see what I've got. 7:30, bam, okay? Or 7:29, whatever, right? I've got 10 Hydras plus 7, 17 Hydras, right? Looks like I don't have another one on the way, okay? This is something for you to practice. Now, I'm not going to play anymore, right? We'll focus on the next videos in the future, right? 17 Hydras, and I want you to beat that. You should probably be able to get 18 or even 19 with a better mining, and you know, if you learn all of your correct, you know, mineral boosting and stuff, you can probably beat me, right? But let's put this into perspective, right? Opponent comes out, 8 zealots, 5 corsairs, and you have 17 Hydras. Who wins? You're going to win, right? Now, it depends on the situation. Like, maybe they trade their overlords and zealots and stuff, but 17 Hydras versus 8 zealots? If you're hiding behind a SimCity like this, they will never be able to do that. And even if you bunch up your units and you have some of these extra lings, you can do some serious damage, okay? So I'm not going to talk yet about what to do with these Hydras, right? I started moving them out just out of habit, but you should probably just leave them here until you know exactly what's going on. But that's going to be it for week 1, okay? Focus on getting your optimal mining at each base, okay? Each base, obsess over it, literally obsess over it. Just like play it. At the end of 7:30, log whether or not you just did it, whether or not you have 30 drones, and whether or not you you have all these things, right? Wait, how come I don't have 30 drones? 29? Huh? Maybe something's off of my build. I have to go back and do my homework. So, all right, that's gonna be it for week 1. Good luck. I'll see you again for week 2, and yeah, bash some Protoss.